Hi, I'm ScienceMan and welcome to Science Anomaly. In this video series, we tackle misinformation and misconceptions, and we try to do it in under 10 minutes. So, let's get started. And if you like what you see, please subscribe. So to very briefly describe this episode's misinformation, there are various memes and infographics being spread on social media that essentially say that there are more than enough trees on Earth to absorb all the human-made fossil fuel carbon dioxide emissions. The one I want to examine in particular today is one that focuses on Canada, claiming that Canadian trees absorb 13 times more CO2 than Canadian-made fossil fuel emissions. But before I point out that misinformation, I'd like to talk about a particular misinformation technique. It could be called disingenuous comparison, or simply put, deliberately comparing the wrong numbers. Now, to explain this, it would help to look at an old parable, the horse who knew too much. The story goes a farmer had a very good horse that was also very smart. So he gave it a physics book so it wouldn't be bored when it wasn't pulling his cart. One day the farmer hooked up the horse to the cart for a day of work, and the horse refused to move. The farmer, perplexed, asked the horse why it would not pull the cart. And the horse replied, "Well, Newton's third law says that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. If I pull on this cart, an equal and opposite force will be applied by the cart on me. So, if the force I apply is always going to be counteracted oppositely, why should I bother trying to move the cart?" And herein lies the beauty of misinformation. It often contains a grain of truth. It's perfectly correct that there will be an action-reaction force pair, as per Newton's third law, when the horse pulls on the cart. When the horse applies a force forward, there will be an equal force backward applied by the cart to the horse. But here's the deal. The force that the cart is applying to the horse is completely irrelevant. If we want to assess whether the cart will accelerate forward or not, we need to consider only the forces that are applied to the cart. So let's check out another action-reaction pair. When the cart moves forward, it applies a force to the ground. In turn, the ground applies an equal and opposite force due to friction on the cart. So now, let's consider only the forces on the cart. There is the force forward applied by the horse, and then there is the force backward due to friction. As you can see, the force forward is greater, meaning there is a net force forward, and the cart will accelerate forward. So the horse was comparing the wrong forces when assessing whether the cart will move. So now let's look at this tree carbon dioxide lie. As with most misinformations, it has several elements of truth in it. One tree absorbs 48 pounds of carbon dioxide in a year. True. Canada has about 318 billion trees. True. So Canadian trees can absorb about 15 trillion pounds or 7.6 billion tons of CO2 in a year. True. Canadian fossil fuel emissions are about 600 million tons of CO2 per year. True. Now, following this logic, Canadian trees can remove about 13 times more CO2 than Canada produces burning fossil fuels. False. That's where misinformation wants you to believe that only CO2 that Canadian trees absorb is produced by fossil fuel emissions. That is completely ridiculous. To understand why that is ridiculous, let's briefly go back in time to pre-industrial times. We can assume there was at least as many trees then, probably many more since the forestry industry hadn't started yet. In pre-industrial times, did trees absorb carbon dioxide? Of course they did. Did they remove so much CO2 that they ended up depleting it or removing it completely from the atmosphere? No. The environment naturally produces CO2, a lot of it. The respiration of plants and animals, decomposing vegetation, natural combustion from wildfires, ocean outgassing, venting volcanoes, those are just a few sources of CO2. This is all part of the natural carbon cycle, where carbon moves between plants, microbes, animals, the soil and minerals, rivers, lakes, and oceans, and the atmosphere. For tens of thousands of years prior to industrialization, the CO2 levels on Earth were relatively stable, about 260 parts per million in the atmosphere. This is because the trees and vegetation and other absorbers of carbon dioxide naturally balanced the producers of carbon dioxide, forming an equilibrium like many natural cycles and processes tend to do. All of that is great until humans begin extracting fossil fuels and burning them. Now, carbon dioxide starts increasing in the atmosphere because all the natural absorbers of carbon dioxide cannot keep up with the excess of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That is why it's disingenuous to compare the excess carbon dioxide produced by humans to the total amount that trees can absorb. Yes, trees can absorb a lot of carbon dioxide, but most of the carbon dioxide they are absorbing already occurs naturally. When we add human-produced carbon dioxide to the total, now it becomes more than trees and the other vegetation can absorb. So in summary, to say that trees on Earth can easily absorb all the carbon dioxide human beings produce is misleading at best and misinformation and lies at worst. By all means, we should plant more trees. Trees are excellent absorbers of carbon dioxide. But even if tens of millions of more trees were planted every year, it would not be enough to counteract what humans are putting into the atmosphere. We need to drastically reduce burning of fossil fuels to slow and reverse the trend of rising carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Thanks for listening to this episode of Science Anomaly. I hope you like it, and don't forget to subscribe.